Welcome back to another reading and correcting with me, Kindar, the Tiger Writes, and Ty, the Tiger Supervisor. These are where I read a chapter from one of my stories and correct it as I go. If you want to listen to these live, it's every Tuesday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Time on Twitch and YouTube. And if you are looking to support me, that is on Ream Stories. Today we are doing chapter 3 of The Captain's Heart. I got one of the scientists to come back, Yanth said as Jeremy exited the lift. Good. Did he say what they screwed up? She chuckled. The best I was able to manage was to convince Roland to return, even though he's done with his day. Stratford? Yes. According to the sensor, he should reach the lab's antechamber about the same time as you. Which of Amanda's design is it? The hurried typing was audible. Delta 753. Hers in her codification. Jeremy grumbled. Load that into the suit's heads up. Tell me clean up. We're smart enough to get out of there. Smart enough not to enter, actually. One of them clued me in when they asked why it was warmer than it should be in there. It was still under the notification threshold. Well, at least someone knows to pay attention to details. The antechamber was empty. Where's Roland? He asked, taking off his jacket and throwing it on the bench. ETA 2 minute. He was down to his underwear when the scientist entered. What were you doing in there? Jeremy demanded, taking the protective pants off the hook. We were running tolerance tests on a new prototype. What's wrong? The light over the door switched from green to red without the usual intervening yellow. Yanthe? I just had a spike in temperature. I think it's from something failing, but the heat's screwing up the sensors in there. Details, he demanded of the scientist, grabbing the suit's torso. We didn't do anything wrong. Everything... Roland, I don't have time for you to pass the blame on someone else. There's an antimatter reactor in there heating up, and it's not one of mine, so I don't even start with knowledge of what it should be doing. I need to know what test you were running when... Then staying here to answer any other question I have while I fix this mess you and your team made. Shouldn't I go to another section? In case you can't stop this? So long as you keep answering my questions, you're welcome to find yourself a ship and tell them to go as far as needed to get yourself out of the explosion range of all the antimatter we have in storage. Tell them to go as far as needed to get yourself out of the explosion range of all the antimatter we have in storage. Out of range of the and storage of the range of other exploding. When this breaches containment. He sealed the second arm. If you think any of the ship have that kind of accelerations. But Jeremy pointed to the comm set, then set the element over his head. The heads up came on, giving him green on all the suit's interface. He slung the tool bag over his shoulder with a hand, swiping the designs out of the way. We were testing a new set of controller to see if they would distribute the heat more uniformly and allow the reaction to reach a higher temperature to increase the efficiency. Fuck, that's hot. Jeremy grinned from the open door. You'll be fine. He stepped in and sealed the door. He had checked the readout before opening it. A demonstration of what their carelessness had caused was one thing. Willfully hurting Willfully hurting him was another. Inside the sealed laboratory, the temperature was quickly climbing. Let me guess, Jeremy said as he set the heads up to overlay Amanda's schematic onto the onto the reactor. You didn't pull those controllers out as its procedure when you shut down. There was no point. We have the reactor for the next 8 shifts, and we still have test runs on them. Well, once I keep this from blowing up, we are going to have a talk about why the procedures are in place. Where are those controllers? Panel 5, 8, and 8. 5, 8, and 12. Yeah, before the sensor failed, what were their reading? The readings of the power distribution through those panels. Jeremy looked at the overlay for panel 5, then dropped to his knees, taking the fasteners, holding the side in front. Look at it for panel 5. Taking the fasteners, holding the front of it out. The controller was 3 layers down, which meant he didn't have the time to pull out everything from the top to reach it. Sending that to Roland because it looks fine to me. He got on his back, took tool bag on his chest, and pulled himself inside the reactor. The temperatures on the heads up jumped, turned red, and flashed. He deactivated that sensor. He was sweating hard enough already. Jeremy? Yanth asked. The indicator showed she was on a private channel. I'm reading that your temperature sensor failed. He shut it down. I shut it down. Without it, you won't know when it's time to poke a fork in me and call me done. I know. I don't need the distraction. The controller stood out against the schematic's original design. Poke you? Antique term my mom uses when cooking. It's got to do with knowing when the food's ready to eat. He attached an energy sensor to the board. I'm not seeing anything unusual on those readouts, Roland said. The energy's higher than I remember our last readout being, but well within acceptable parameters. Well, those readouts were taken before or after the reactor was shut down? Before. There's no point in taking one after since there isn't going to... Oh, yeah. But you're right. I'm not seeing the surge that could explain this. He pulled himself out, and the suit felt cool without the direct heat. A check of panel 8 and 12 showed the same lack of surge. Jimmy rested his head on the empty space between the support legs. Tell me you did something else, Roland. No, this was the approved research. Roland, we've gone beyond you covering your ass. What did you do that wasn't part of the proposal you submitted to Amanda? Nothing, I swear. We didn't go beyond what we stated we were going to test. Then we have a problem, because your controllers aren't causing this. He pulled out the portable scanners and immediately realized it was useless. It was so hot within the reactor. It was so hot within the reactor's technician access. The reactor's technician's access. It was overloaded. Temperature spike would have to be that, or that of an explosion. Of an explosion, or to register. At this point, he pulled himself deeper. Yeah, probably why I did not use that. At this point, the overload had to have done damage to the components he'd be able to see. Hopefully, it wasn't going to be the last one he looked at, because by then, what the fuck? The component he was looking at didn't match the overlay schematic, was blocky and patched into 7 energy conduit and 3 heat channels? Yanth, I'm trusting Roland when he said they didn't add anything undocumented. Who worked on this before them, and when was it? This was our first time, our first shift. Shift with it, Roland offered. The previous team was led with Oyun Remold. They were testing a self-balancing system from what I'm reading of the accepted proposal. Did they take it out? This could be a balancing system. He attached the energy sensor to one of the conduit. According to the exit report they did. Yeah, at this point I don't trust those. Tell me someone visually confirmed they had it with them when they left. This isn't something one of them could have sneaked under his jacket. The sensor sent an alarm to his heads up. Well, he had the problem. Going over the recording of them leaving now, Yanth said. Roland, why do we let you tamper with our proven designs? Jeremy asked, studying the cover. Because they are proven, the scientist replied in a lecturing tone. Engineers are great at building things that work, but the Science Council feels that because we are centuries behind the species within the Federation, we can't be satisfied with things just working. We need to push forward until we have caught up to them, even if it kills us all in the process. Okay, Yanth said. I double check with when they entered, and I can't see whatever they brought in. Then you know who to file a grievance against while I see about making sure they're around to explain themselves. He unsealed the cover, and while he was sure that it would make sense to whoever has built it, it looked like a mess to him. Jeremy, the sensors for the reactor's containment just flicked on for a second, and it's down. Don't tell me. I already have enough to worry about. The heat's degrading the magnetic field. I fixed this, and that resolves itself. I don't, and it won't matter if the explosion is caused by the power overload or the field failing. He attached sensors to each component, set them to report the flow of energy, and frowned. He set them for energy and heat, and got something that made no sense. Power conduit needed to be as cool as possible to improve flow. That was difficult enough within the confines of the reactor, but to have the heat conduit bundled against them? There were other components, so this was part of what they'd been testing. 3 of them, with the power conduit splits, so an even number were against each of the heat conduit. Self-regulating system is what Yanth had said, using heat to affect the power, then sensing what happened, and somewhere in there would be controllers to dictating response, hopefully. And because this needed to be self-regulating, one of the idiot scientists had to have shut down the override sensors. They weren't allowed to do that for safety reasons, so they'd covered it up and no one knew about it. And they'd forgotten or not bothered undoing the damage. Fuck this. He wasn't fixing this problem by working his way back to an origin point. He pulled himself out and climbed onto the reactor. Jeremy? Yanth asked, going manual on this. He pulled the torch and quickly cut through the seals, keeping the top of the reactor chamber closed. Isn't the inside of that thing, dangerous? Very, but I think it's less dangerous than the whole thing blowing up. The alarm on his heads up came on, despite him shutting them down. There were limits to what safeties he was allowed to ignore, passively ignore. These he ignored actively, as he ignored the pain of the suit melting against his arm. At least it still protected his muscles, so he was able to take hold of the handle at the top of the antimatter case. He turned it, grinding his teeth as it resisted. It shouldn't be this hard, even the least heat deformable. This is going to be heat deformable material, but it shouldn't be this hard, but even the least heat deformable material shifted when exposed to these kind of heat. It jerked, unlocked, and he hoped the port had sealed as they should. With a scream, he pulled. It resisted, then came loose, and, while not particularly heavy, it unbalanced him and he fell back. Jan's terrified scream in his ear nearly covered the sound of the case bouncing on the floor. He laughed, as the suit sensor already registered the drop in temperature. There's nothing to be scared of. Those cases are made to survive anything short of an antimatter explosion. Jeremy, Omar said, coming to a stop as soon as he was past the entrance to the medical room. What happened? His shrug was hampered by the rejuvenating fluid case over his arm. A bunch of scientists decided the regulations didn't apply to them, and this was the price. Cheaper than the alternative, if you ask me. Can I approach? He asked the medical technician. Yes, Dr. Sawan. Engineer Bradshaw has been treated for his radiation exposure. An hour and his arm will be repaired. Although he has been mandated to be off work for 3 days. Just in time for the weekend, Jeremy said. Look at me. I thought that your I thought that as your doctor, Omar said, I had advised you against high stress. You know what that does to your stomach. Jeremy laughed. Buddy, dealing with that reactor wasn't stressful. He locked. He locked eyes with his friends. Now, that woman you tried to set me up with, that is a different thing entirely. And that concludes chapter 3 of The Captain's Heart. If you are enjoying this, please leave a like. If you want to know when the next chapter is going to be up, subscribe and hit the bell. If you want to read the story, it is currently only available on my support side, Ream Story. If you want to listen to these live, it's every Tuesday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Time on Twitch and YouTube. Links are in the notes, and with that, I shall wish you a good day.